Gonzaga beat LMU by 20 and St. Mary's lost, but the vibes around the team right now remain pretty miserable.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to give you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, folks, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app now or head to FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, Gonzaga needed a late surge to beat LMU after sleeping through most of the first half and, frankly, about the first half of the second half as well. We're going to talk about the game. We're going to talk about why I'm not as upset about it as many others are. Plus, we're going to preview Pacific, talk about this Tigers team that Gonzaga plays on the road on Saturday, and some Zag records getting rewritten, plus a look at the NBA Zags, a couple moves, return from an injury, and Yvonne Ejim's latest accomplishment. All that coming up, jam-packed episode today, but we start recapping this game against LMU. 73-53, the final score. Gonzaga wins by 20. The spread was like 23.5, so it doesn't even look like a particularly abnormal final score. The end result was sort of what the general consensus expected, obviously. For watching that game, it did not feel that way. It did not feel that way. Khalif Battle re-entered the starting lineup. He was great in this game, great comparatively to everybody else. He still was 4 of 13 from the field, but he did what he wanted, what we wanted to see him do, get to the free throw line, converted there. We'll get to it in a second, but he re-enters the starting lineup in place of Emmanuel Innocente. Also, Dusty Stromer does not play on Dusty Stromer bobblehead night. This is a rare type of event for Gonzaga to have a giveaway specifically for a player. And of course, very unfortunate that Dusty was unable to play in this game. I feel for him. I'm sure he wanted to be out on the floor like he always wants to be out on the floor, but I'm sure even more so knowing that was the bobblehead night. But alas, he's unable to get on the court. And look, I said it already. I'm not going to be as doomer as so many other people were. I saw it. I watched the game. I know the frustration. I felt it deep in my bones. I understand, but some of the reaction to this game was insane. Like, the Zags ended up with a 20-point win. I know that results is not everything, and that the process in the middle of this game was pretty atrocious, but ultimately, you break this game into kind of 3 parts. There was basically 15 minutes of good basketball and 25 minutes of bad basketball. It's pretty easy to focus on the 25 minutes of bad basketball. The Zags could not buy a bucket. The offense looked listless. They shot horribly from 3. There was a stretch where I think they went 5 of 25 from the field in the first half of this game. They barely made any threes. They looked like they still are having issues with like team chemistry and figuring out the right recipes. And it's February. It's frustrating. Trust me, I get it. It's frustrating. But when you only play 15 minutes of good basketball in a game and you outscore the team you're playing, that's a decent D1 team, by 27 points in those 15 minutes, I just have a hard time being upset. Like, I have a hard time feeling so frustrated that they played poorly for 25 minutes of this game and still won by 20. It's, and I think part of it too is that the things we have been so angry about Gonzaga this year weren't really the problems in this game. You could make an argument that that's what's more frustrating. And sure, I could hear that. But the fact that Gonzaga played good defensively in this game, the fact that the issues they've had with defensive communication and rotations and not getting out on 3-point shooters, those were not problems in this game. Gonzaga played well on that end of the floor. They held LMU to a really poor shooting night. LMU was like under 35% from the field in this game. That is awful. And yeah, Gonzaga didn't shoot it well, but that is, if they hold teams to under 35%, they're going to win every single time. That's fantastic. Every team in college basketball, if you score over 70 points and you hold the other team to 35%, you're going to win. That's a recipe for success. Gonzaga obviously not always doing that. They're not always holding teams to that well defensively, but they're also not usually scoring 73 points. They average 88. So for them to have an offensive night on a day where they played some of the best defense they've played all season long, just does not bother me the way that it might bother other people. Maybe it's because I'm recording this later on Friday, late morning, and most of the reaction I read about the game from people was right after the game, and the amount of comments I got of like, well, if you take out the last 10 minutes, why would you take out the last 10 minutes? They outscored LMU by 21 points in the final 10 minutes. That's fantastic. That's a quarter of the basketball game that they just smashed this LMU team. They shouldn't have needed to do that. They beat LMU by 28 last time over 40 minutes. This time they only beat LMU by 27 points in 15 minutes, but they got outscored by them by 7 in the other 25 minutes. Yes, that's not good, obviously. Graham Ike getting a technical foul is bad. That is incredibly frustrating. They gave a whole big spiel about how he's improved and how he's remorseful for the tech against Santa Clara. And then he gets another one against St. Mary's and he gets another one here. Like, you got to learn from it, dude. And to Mark Few's credit, he said after the game he's finding the guys for getting technical fouls. So Graham Ike lost some money. He also only played 6 minutes in the second half. Off night for Graham Ike. Bummer. 2 of 18 from 3. Horrendous. Nolan Hickman was 0 of 4. He just did not play well in this game. Continues to be a player who's mysteriously absent at crucial times. Khalif Battle, 1 of 7. Emmanuel Innocente, 0 of 3. But for the first 5 minutes of this game, Gonzaga outscored LMU 12-5. They forced 6 turnovers in 5 minutes. Everything we've wanted to see from Gonzaga defensively happened in the first 5 minutes of this game, and it was glorious. We talked so much. I want to see the other team have to call a timeout before the first media timeout. Happened. Check. Awesome job by Gonzaga's defense. And then to outscore them by 21 points in the final 10 minutes of this game. Khalif Battle had 10 points in the final 10 minutes. Braden Huff had 9. Nembhard had 5 points and 5 assists in the last 10 minutes of this game. It's just hard to be super pissed about a listless part of this game in the middle of February when teams often have kind of lull periods, when they have a game coming up on Saturday and they got to go on the road right afterwards, when the end result was a 20-point win. People are going to disagree that I'm not as pissed off about their offense being stagnant for large chunks of this game, but this is not a consistent problem for Gonzaga. There are things that are consistent problems, like slow starts to halves, and like bad defense rotations and limiting or giving up too many good 3-point opportunities. Those weren't problems in this game. It was great to see them fix some of the issues that have been plaguing them throughout the year. To have an off shooting night to go along with that and still win by 21 just ultimately puts me in a situation where I'm not as upset about this as many others are. I want to kind of speed through some of the keys we laid out before this game here in this segment before we get to our preview of Pacific. Key number 1 was discipline on defense, like I said. LMU, 35% from the field. In fact, 34.5% from the field. 4 of 22 from 3. Gonzaga was 2 of 18. Horrible shooting night. LMU, not really any better. 4 of 22 is pretty darn bad. The Lions had 11 turnovers in this game. Like we said, 6 of them were in the first 5 minutes. So again, only 5 turnovers in the last 35 minutes. So we would have liked to see them continue to get more turnovers to continue to force some errors from this LMU team. But the defense looked better. You could see the rotations were better. They were crisper. They were communicating more. Khalif Battle had a quote after the game about how we want to be vicious. We want to be nasty. Like, we want to make our identity on that end of the floor. In this game, they did. They held an LMU team that's decent offensively to 53 points. They got it done on that end of the floor in this game. Key number 2 was to get the transfers cooking. Well, nobody really cooked in this game. And the player who cooked the most is Khalif Battle. 24 points for him, led the team by a considerable amount. He was 4 of 13. Not good. In fact, he was 3 of 6 on 2-pointers. He was 1 of 7 from 3. Would still wish he would settle for less threes, but especially at the end of the game when they needed him, this dude got the ball, got downhill, got to the rim, got to the free throw line. It is what we have been saying and wishing and pleading for Khalif Battle to do all season long, and he did it. He made 4 more free throws than LMU. You're going to win a lot of basketball games if one of your players makes more free throws than the entire other team. That is a recipe for success. This is the Khalif Battle that we wanted, and he did it. He knocked it out. He got it done, and he's the reason Gonzaga walked away with the win in this game. Michael Ajayi, not so much. 2 points for him. They were a critical 2 points. They actually spurned that 28-7 run with about 10 minutes to go. Gonzaga was down by 1 at that time. Ends up winning this game, of course, by 20 after going on that run. It was a run out for Ajayi, a dunk. He only had the 2 points, but he was also only 1 of 2 from the field, so it's not like he was missing a bunch of shots. He had 6 rebounds. He played good defense. It was not a bad – he actually was the finisher in this game. He was on the floor. It was him and Huff on the floor to finish out the game. He played more minutes than Ben Gregg and, frankly, played better than Ben, even though he scored less points. He played better in this game. So the stats don't point to Ajayi having a particularly big impact on this game, but I thought it was a strong game from him. Key number 3 was to see Dusty and Braden get back on track. Obviously, we did not see Dusty Stromer in this game, so we will see if he is healthy enough to play at Pacific. But this was a great game for Braden Huff. 14 points for him off the bench, 8 boards, 5 of them offensive rebounds. He was 6 of 10 in 19 minutes. This is a good game from him. 9 points down the stretch. He was a huge part of Gonzaga winning this game. This is the second most important part, and maybe third behind Nembhard, but him performing well down the stretch, especially, again, you need to send a message to Ike. Stop running your mouth. Like, you need to be able to communicate to him that this is not acceptable. And one of the best ways to do that is to prove we don't need to play you. I know you're on the Karl Malone watch list as the best power forward in the country. He's an incredibly important player on this roster. But when Braden Huff plays well, it sends that message deeply that Graham needs to keep it under control if he wants to be this player's go-to guy late in games, because they can use Braden, and he can be that guy. He's not as consistent. Both of them have consistency issues. This was Graham's first bad game in a while, but this is a good sign for Gonzaga that both these guys, again, not always consistent, but both these guys are playing well, and Braden took over this game when Graham didn't have a good one. Key number 4 is to get out in transition, fire up the home crowd. We had some moments. The Ryan Nembhard pass to Michael Ejim for the dunk, followed by Nembhard hitting that open 3. That got the place fired up. That was the catalyst. Those 2 plays really pushed Gonzaga to get this W. They played great in the start of the game. They played okay to start the second half, but not great. Just too sleepy in the middle of this game. Just too sleepy, got the crowd kind of out of the game. It was frustrating to see how they played in the middle of this basketball game. Key number 5 was to hopefully get some walk-ons on the floor and not have to play the starters the whole game. That did not happen at all. Nembhard, in fact, did play the entire game. I think Battle played 37 minutes. Too many guys playing too many minutes because Gonzaga could not pull away from this game until the final few minutes. Well, folks, the Zags pretty much hit the road right after this game. They're down in Stockton, California to take on the Tigers of Pacific, a new-look team that has only really played well against one team this year, but it was the other team from the Inland Northwest. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. You just pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. For me, $15 down on Travis Kelce to score a touchdown, Jalen Hurts to rush for a touchdown. If both those things happen, I win $52 just like that. And here's what I love most: fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. So check out all the promos and check it all out here on use Locked On College, the code, to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're moving away from Gonzaga's 20-point win over LMU on Thursday night to get you ready for Gonzaga's first and only matchup this season against the Pacific Tigers. Saturday, February 8th. The game is at 5 p.m. Pacific time. It will be on ESPN Plus. Again, that means KHQ in the Spokane area. That means Fox 13 Plus in the Seattle area. Like we said, the way that the scheduling worked out for all the WCC teams this year is there's 2 teams that everybody doesn't play twice. With those 2 teams, they split. There's one team that they'll only play on the road and one team that they'll only play at home. Gonzaga is only playing San Diego at home this year. They're not playing them on the road. And for Pacific, they are only playing them on the road. They are not hosting Pacific in Spokane this year. Dave Smart took over as the head coach for the Tigers, replacing Leonard Perry. It's been a rough go for Pacific. They were decent in the Damon Stoudemire era. This is a tough program to recruit at. They had some violations when Stoudemire first took over that he kind of got them through that era. He moved on. They hired Perry. It didn't work for him there. They're a low-resource school. It's hard to win at Pacific. Dave Smart was an innovative coach. He's a very successful college basketball coach in Canada, extremely successful coaching in Canada. He came to the United States as an assistant coach for Texas Tech last year. Now is poached over here at Pacific. I spoke to him at WCC Media Day. I really like his philosophy. He kind of basically said, we're probably not going to be good this year, but we expect to be good going forward. He said, my first year at a lot of places has been bad, and then we get going after that. And so far, his projection is pretty much correct. 8-18 on the year for the Tigers, 3-9 in the WCC. 2 of those 3 wins have both come against Washington State, one of the strangest anomalies in the conference this year. They beat Washington State on the road in Pullman, thanks to a 40-burger from Lamar Washington, a Texas Tech transfer, literally dropped 40 against the Cougars, including the game-winning 3. They also beat them at home by 2 points. They just beat San Diego on Thursday, their 3rd win in conference play. So 2 against Wazoo, 1 against San Diego. That is where you get your W's. And while they have 9 losses in conference play, not a ton of blowouts. They do have a few blowout losses, but St. Mary's only beat them by 10. San Diego only beat them by 10 the other time. San Francisco only beat them by 8. Portland only beat them by 3. LMU only beat them by 5. Granted, they also lost by 17 to Pepperdine. They lost to Santa Clara by 24. And the big one right after, coming off that emotional win over Wazoo in Pullman, Oregon State came in and thumped them by 46 points. So we've seen some bad games for this team, and non-conference was not super impressive. They did beat San Jose State early in the non-conference. That was a nice win for them. Pine Bluff and Fullerton are their only non-con wins. They played a pretty competitive schedule. They lost to Arkansas, they lost to Missouri, they lost to Colorado, they lost to UNLV, but they also lost some not as good games. Northern Arizona, shout out Gary Bell. They lost to Hawaii, they lost to Portland State and Idaho, among others. That puts them in a spot where they are 301st currently at KenPom. Adjusted offensive efficiency is 270th. Their adjusted defensive efficiency is 300th. Their tempo is 244th. There's just not a whole lot of things this team does well, folks. That is the simple explanation for this Tigers team. They have 3.4% of their minutes continuity. That is 342nd in the country. This is about as new of a roster as you're going to see in college basketball outside of the Kentuckys and the Louisvilles. This is it. This is a brand new team for Dave Smart. Obviously now, by the time we're in February, they have played together, but coming into the season, their minutes continuity was 3.5%. They also have 1.34 average years of D1 experience on the roster. That ranks 253rd. One of the youngest teams in the country, one of the least continuous rosters in the country. And like I said, they're pretty bad on both ends of the floor. Their 47.7% field goal percentage is 299th in the country, barely a top 300 team in terms of field goal percentage. They shoot 29.6% from 3. That is 337th in the country. They have a turnover rate of 19%. That is 279th. Their non-steal turnover rate, that's travels, passing the ball out of bounds, etc., is 321st at 9.1%. So they are one of the most turnover-prone teams in the country. They're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. They're one of the worst in terms of overall effective field goal percentage teams in the country. Defensively, opponents shoot 37.5% from 3 against them. That makes their defense on threes 345th in the country. They give up an effective field goal percentage to opponents of 53.8. That's 302nd. So they're not guarding anybody. They're giving up easy looks. They're giving up a lot of three-point shots. They don't shoot the 3 ball well. They turn the ball over a lot. It's not a great team. It is not a great roster right now for Dave Smart. I think that there is signs of optimism. I've been impressed by him as a coach. Beating Wazoo twice is not nothing for a team that still doesn't have a lot of continuity even this far into the season. But yeah, the overall talent on this roster is just not good enough to compete with the top of this. Really, most teams in this conference, they're just not good enough to be a WCC team at this point in the rebuild. The names to know, we'll start with Lamar Washington. He's actually the 3rd leading scorer, but we mentioned him earlier with that 40-burger against Wazoo. He's averaging 12.7 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds per game. He also averages 4 turnovers per game. He has the ball in his hands a lot. Very, very talented player. Their leading scorer is Elijah Fisher, who's a transfer from DePaul, 16 points per game, 5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. And then a player they brought in from Canada. I spoke to him at the media day as well, Elias Ralph. Very, very good player. He put up huge numbers for them in the non-conference, slowed down a bit in conference play, but he's still averaging 15.7 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 1.2 blocks. So they got 3 pretty good players. Here's the problem. Nobody else on this roster is averaging more than 7 points per game. They're getting very little out of starting center Jazz Gardner. They're just not getting enough production from anybody outside of their big 3. And in fact, Dave Smart uses their bench 20.1% of the time. That is 360th. They are literally basically the lowest bench usage team in all of Division I college basketball. Expect to see a whole lot of the starting five on Saturday for Gonzaga. You wear those guys down, you get into their bench, you have an easy chance of winning and winning by a significant amount against a Pacific team that just doesn't really have the horses to hang. Before we move on, I want to talk about what we're going to see on Saturday. Not only a win for Gonzaga, most likely it would be a catastrophic loss if that were to happen, but we're going to see Ryan Nembhard break his record for most assists in a single season. He currently has 238 assists on the year. 243 is how many he got last year to break Gonzaga's record. That means he needs 5 assists to tie his record, 6 assists to break it. He's averaging about 10 per game. He's going to break the record against Pacific. Barring something where he does not play the full game, he's going to get there. That will be a big accomplishment for him. He already has the top 2 single season assists in Gonzaga history because he passed Josh Perkins not that long ago, but he's now going to reset the record. He's 47 assists away from passing Emmett Nar for the most in WCC single season history. That would mean he'd need to average about 6.7 assists over the next 7 games. Again, he's averaging about 10. He needs 62 assists to get to 300 on the year, which again has only been done 5 times since 1993. That means over the next 7 regular season games, he would need to average 8.8 assists in order to do that. Again, that's just regular season games. The Zags will have games in the WCC tournament for him to get there as well. So he's extremely likely to not only break the WCC record, but to get into that 300 assist club as well. Well, speaking of records, Yvonne Ejim, Gonzaga's all-time leading scorer. She broke the record at St. Mary's on Saturday. We're going to talk about that, plus some awards to look out for and some Zags in the NBA news. All that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that is the icing on the cake. Chiefs, 1.5-point favorites right now. Plus, they have plus 130 odds on Travis Kelce scoring a touchdown. I said I'm putting that on Prize Picks. I'm going to put it on FanDuel as well. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, folks, closing out the show here with kind of a hodgepodge of information, of award watch lists, of records, of NBA stuff, just to kind of get all the news out before we get into the weekend. We'll start with Saturday. The Lady Zags win another game, this one on the road against St. Mary's. Meanwhile, Yvonne Ejim officially breaks Heather Bowman's record. She's now Gonzaga's all-time leading scorer in terms of total points scored. She had another phenomenal game for her, 27 points, 11 rebounds. She was 11 of 19 from the field and 5 of 5 from the stripe. Ejim is now Gonzaga's all-time record holder in points, rebounds, field goals, effective field goal percentage, PER or player efficiency rating, box plus minus. Ejim is not only breaking these records because she is in her 5th year. Yes, that is a caveat that should be applied in these situations for her being the first 1,000-point or 1,000 rebounder, first 2,000 or third 2,000 point scorer. Actually, Sloot and Heather Bowman were all there, but she's the record holder in effective field goal percentage, and player efficiency rating. Those are not volume stats; those are rate stats. So to be this productive as a 5th-year player, where her overall advanced numbers are still the best in school history, is tremendous. She is an extraordinary talent and had a massive game here against St. Mary's on the road in Moraga to pick up a W for this team. Just tremendous stuff from her. She is on the Becky Hammond mid-major award watch list to win that award. She already won it last year. Very, very strong candidate to win it again this year. She's on the Katrina McLean Award watch list for Power Forward of the Year. She's on the Ann Drysdale Award watch list for Player of the Year. She was also named to the Women's College All-Star Game. The awards are just racking up for Yvonne, and she deserves every single one of them for a tremendous season and a tremendous career that she has had in Spokane with the Zags. Moving back over to the men's side, Ryan Nembhard, Graham Ike also on watch list. We talked about this briefly with Nembhard. He's on the Bob Cousy Award watch list for the Point Guard of the Year. Phenomenal passer, not a good enough, well-rounded player to win over Braden Smith at Purdue. I think he is going to be the likely winner there. Graham Ike was named to the Karl Malone Award watch list for the best power forward in the country, but Graham plays center. My understanding is that Gonzaga submits them at certain positions, so they wanted Graham to be eligible to win at the power forward spot. He's going up against Johni Broome, so he's not going to win. Johni Broome is the best or second best player in college basketball behind Cooper Flagg of Duke. Graham, even after a poor performance against LMU, he's not going to win that award, but still nice accomplishment to have two Zags getting nominated for positional awards this season. Going over to the NBA side of things to close out the show, we talked earlier in the week about Zach Collins getting traded from San Antonio to Chicago, joining his third NBA team. He ended up not being the only Zag traded. I did on that show, I talked about the likelihood of other Zags getting traded and said basically maybe Rui gets traded from the Lakers, but otherwise I don't see any other former Zags getting traded. I was incorrect. The Toronto Raptors, somewhat inexplicably, I'm not going to pretend to follow everything in the NBA close enough to know, but I wasn't expecting a seemingly rebuilding Toronto team to make a trade for Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans, but they did. Included in that trade was Kelly Olynyk, so Kelly goes from Toronto to New Orleans to play for the Pelicans, and it's kind of sad. You know, Kelly's a Canadian, homegrown Canadian, the captain of Team Canada, the Olympics. He has been representing his country with the Canadian flag for over a decade. He grew up a Raptors fan. He talked extensively about how excited he was to play for the Toronto Raptors. And he gets traded almost exactly a year later. Doesn't get to finish out the 2-year deal that he had with Toronto. Traded in the middle of the season, leaves his home country. Like, just a sad thing. Like, he's not complaining about it. Certainly he's a professional. Everybody gets it. This is how professional sports work. But certainly when looking at the professional ranks, even college to an extent, like when players kind of utilize their power, I am going to use my no trade clause. I'm going to say I'm only going to sign with these, whatever it is. I know that can rub fans the wrong way, but this is the flip side of that. You can get traded in the middle of a season from your home team. Like it happens, and New Orleans gets a good one. He's going to be a pro out there. He's going to back up Yves Missy, who's the starting center for New Orleans, a rookie who's from Baylor, was very, very good for the Bears last year. What a great player for him to get to learn from in Kelly Olynyk, who's played 24 games this year, averaging 7 points, 3.5 boards, 2.3 assists, shooting 44% from three. New Orleans gets a good one in Kelly Olynyk. Last, but very certainly not least, Chet Holmgren is back, baby. Oklahoma City playing Toronto tonight. Chet Holmgren returning from an injury that has limited him to just 10 games this season. He played the first 10 games of the year for the Thunder and then got hurt as a hip injury that kept him out for a pretty long time. He's finally back for the rest of the season, man. Oklahoma City was already good. They were real good without him, and they're going to be even better with him back in the mix. 16.5 points, about 8.7 boards, 2.5 blocks, 2 assists on the season in those first 10 games, about 38% from three, getting him back in the mix for this Oklahoma City team with Isaiah Hartenstein, with Jalen Williams, who's an all-star this year. Of course, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort, everybody else. Oklahoma City and the Lakers are probably, maybe not the Lakers yet. Dallas is still going to be in the mix, obviously. Houston's been playing fantastic, but we're looking at what Zags are going to be the next to potentially win an NBA championship, because Gonzaga's history of NBA championships is primarily players who were deep on the bench who won. The Adam Morrison effect. Austin Daye won an NBA championship. Like guys who didn't really contribute much to their teams, but if the Thunder win it, Chet, obviously a critical part of that team. Last year, the Indiana Pacers went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and Andrew Nembhard nearly carried them to the finals in that one. He'd be a part of that. Now, Rui is expected to be a starter on a Lakers team that now has LeBron and Luka Doncic and Mark Williams. That is a great team. Can they rebound from a slow start this year and make a run in the playoffs? I don't know if they'll necessarily be able to do that, but Rui is a contributor for that team. So it'll be interesting to see when the next Zag wins an NBA championship, and if it's a player that is truly contending with that. I mean, even Julian Strawther, if Denver does it, like Strawther's a player. He's more of a player than Morrison was on those Lakers teams, that's for sure. So it'll be fun to see if the Zags are able to, or it'll be funny if Anton Watson makes the bench and Boston wins and he doesn't play. Like, kind of continue the trend for Gonzaga if that were to happen. But we'll see with so many guys in the league, it's only a matter of time before one of them wins another championship. And thinking there's a chance that Chet will be the guy this year. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. A reminder to check out the Locked On Zags Discord channel. Also check out the written content. There's a link below, athlon.com, writing all about Gonzaga basketball there. Going to have a fun game on Saturday against Pacific. Some records going to be broken. We'll recap all of that, get you ready for next week as well on Locked On Zags. Thanks again, folks. Have a great weekend, and go Zags.